Manchester se convirtió en una de las ciudades más rockeras del mundo y vamos a conocer todo sobre la historia de sus bandas junto a una de las personas que mejor conoce sobre la escena musical en Manchester.
My name is Craig Gill. I'm the drummer with Manchester band in Spiral Carpets, and I also run a company called Manchester Music Tours. We're at the south end of the city. This used to be an old industrial area called Knott Mill. It's now been rebranded Deansgate. It's full of lots of posh apartments, but years ago it was full of empty cotton mills, derelict factories, and the music business came into this area in the 70s and 80s and turned them into studios, nightclubs and rehearsal rooms. So this one behind us was a very famous music venue called the Boardwalk. All these empty cotton mills and factories made a great playground for the music business to flourish, and because it was always raining, kids could buy instruments quite cheap and they could form bands, and it was a good way of passing the time and not getting soaking wet. Manchester kids always had access to the best record collections and sounds from all around the world, so that helped us develop some great bands.
The Boardwalk fue un club clave en los años 80 y 90. En él se escuchó por primera vez a Oasis interpretando Rock and Roll Star en el año 1992 ante un público de menos de 20 personas.
Joy Division, the Smiths, Sad Cafe, the Buzzcocks, The Fall, and then in the 80s, Happy Monday, Stone Roses, my band in Spiral Carpets, and then in the 90s, obviously, Oasis, and we're still producing great bands now like Elbow and the Cortinas. Oasis started basically around this area, and he came up to me in a club around the corner called the Hacienda and introduced himself to me. And then when the band took off, we employed him in our office full time. And then when we went on tour, he got to come away with us. We played at the River Plate Stadium in 1991, supporting Paul Simon. And Noel just loved the place. He loved the football, he loved the atmosphere. He come back off tour, he learnt that his brother had joined the band, and he then got the first gig, and we came down to see them, and we witnessed this gig. And then within 18 months, 2 years, they were playing stadiums. But this is where it all started. All the hard work was done in the cellar here.
Inside the eye of your mind, don't you know you might find a better place to play?
We've just come into Salford. So the city of Salford sits by the side of Manchester as a separate city. It's divided by a big river called the River Irwell. So we're just 10 minutes away from the city centre of Manchester. We've come into Salford. This area, again, has produced lots of great bands. Again, members of Joy Division, Graham Nash and Alan Clark from the Hollies. Morrissey lived about a mile away from here. The Smiths, I'd say they're probably the most influential band from Manchester, and I might go as far as to say possibly the most influential band since the Beatles. Morrissey and his genius songwriting and his lyrics and his words, he was able to touch a lot of people with that.
Este es un lugar muy especial para los fans de The Smith, ya que acá mismo se hizo la foto más famosa de los Smith, que está en el disco The Queen is Dead. Amo Big Mouth Strikes Again. Ponelo.
I think the Smiths, what it was a unique blend because Johnny's guitar playing is very uplifting. He kind of juxtaposed with Morrissey's lyrics, which are quite dark. He sang about things that people wouldn't sing about in the 80s. You know, he made albums like Meet His Murder. He wasn't out just to sell records. He was about, this is what I'm about, this is what I'm saying, and that really appealed to people. And what the Smiths did, like a lot of bands, they formed some bands and they sing about America when they'd never even been to America. The Smiths always sang about Manchester. It was always about their experiences. What happened to the Smiths? Well, the Smiths were like a bright shining star that kind of burnt out too soon, really. The pressures of being in the music industry and the pressures put upon them were too much. Johnny was only 23. He was only 23 when the band split up. And so he went off playing with other bands, and I think Morrissey possibly didn't like that, and it started some friction between the two, and it escalated and the press got involved and they went their separate ways.
Otro de los lugares emblemáticos para la música de Manchester es el puente donde el fotógrafo Kevin Cummins fotografió a la banda icónica Joy Division. Vamos con el temón Love Will Tear Us Apart.
Joy Division came down here in 1979 and did a very iconic photo shoot with a very famous Mancunian photographer called Kevin Cummins, and they stood on the bridge in the freezing cold in the snow in 1979 as Kevin kind of took the shot and is silhouetted, and the picture was used on the cover of the NME, and it's now been used on the Best of Joy Division, so it's become a very, very iconic photograph. Bernard Sumner and Peter Hook, they started the band, and then they met two guys from Macclesfield. Started off as like a punk band, playing, as I say, these punk venues for factory nights like Tony Wilson, but the sound quickly developed. They met a very good producer called Martin Hannett, who was able to experiment with synthesizers, and he kind of developed them from being a normal punk band into being something that was more kind of new wave or post-punk, and it really set them apart from the other punk bands. The problem was the singer was ill. He was diagnosed with a form of epilepsy, and so he became very depressed by this because the band was taking off. They were just about to fly to America to start their first American tour, and on the eve of that tour, on the night, Ian Curtis took his own life and committed suicide in 1980. The band actually galvanised, and they decided to carry on without their lead singer and carry on under the name of New Order. Actually became world famous. You know, it took them a while to get there, but they're world famous now, and they're still touring the world, and everybody's heard of New Order, but not many people have heard about the Joy Division story.